Video games are everywhere. They're in our homes, on our phones, they're in our schools, our gyms, they're even in our public bathrooms. But how many people know that video games also exist in cultural institutions, such as libraries and museums? And I'm not just talking about arcade machines and dusty Ataris. Thanks to the shifts in heritage management, many museums have begun future-proofing their exhibitions to include modern-day video games in the interest of art and sociology. Video games play a vital role in today's world. In an age where technology has woven itself into the fabric of our everyday lives, video games have emerged as a cultural force, influencing art, music, and even how we tell stories. They are not just entertainment, they are living, breathing artifacts, each one telling a unique tale. They can be used to teach, to thrill, to emote, to protest, and of course, to compete. Nowadays, many institutions are collecting video games as a form of digital art due to their beauty, their graphics, and their creativity. However, the evolution of the internet and modern technology has also increased the variety, the complexity, and the skills required to navigate digital games. This presents an issue for museums. Without an understanding of software development, how do we catalogue, preserve, and archive digitally born games? And if we're not the players of these games, how will we begin to understand the immense impact they have on people's lives and identities? If we're struggling to keep up with modern games, how can we solve the problem of technology obsolescence when it comes to safeguarding our analogue video games? My name is Alysha, and I'm a specialist in audiovisual preservation. I've been exploring these questions for my PhD, and I'd like to present you all with the idea of collaborating with the gaming community to better improve our collection management practices surrounding video games in museums. This concept has the potential to transform the way we approach the preservation and the registration of video games. Today, we'll hear from experts in both fields to explore how gamers can become better partners through the concept of community consultation. Through insightful interviews and a compelling case study, we'll uncover the power of this alliance and how it can enrich our institutions. So are you ready to level up? Let's play. Meet the gaming community, a vibrant, passionate, and often misunderstood group. Did you know, according to recent surveys, there are over 2.7 billion gamers worldwide? Gaming is a global phenomenon. It spans across all countries and all demographics. Contrary to the stereotype of the solitary gamer, over 70% of gamers play with friends, either cooperatively or competitively. The average age of a gamer is 35, showcasing that gaming is not just a pastime for the youth, but a diverse and inclusive activity for all generations. In terms of gender diversity, the gaming community has seen a significant increase in female gamers. As of 2021, 46% of gamers identify as female, dispelling the notion that gaming is a male-dominated space. And if that isn't enough, as of 2020, the gaming industry's value surpassed $159.3 billion, solidifying its position as one of the most rapidly expanding sectors in entertainment. These statistics not only underscore the immense influence and reach of the gaming community, but they also highlight its inclusivity and global impact. Video games are a dynamic force. They shape cultural conversations, push technological boundaries, and most importantly, for us today, need to be included in museums. We're about to hear from three individuals, Jennifer, Alex, and Morgan, who all enjoy video games and feel very connected to the gaming community. I sat down with each of them to discuss their gameplay experiences and their perspective on the relationship between the player, the game, and the museum.
The memories and experience of gamers are important to museums because these are the people who can provide sufficient context and help identify what's so valuable and important about what artifact or digital material is being preserved. Without that insight, these just become devoid of context. It's just like you wouldn't want an archaeologist to rip a vase out of the ground and not record any context. You wouldn't want to do that with a game. There's a lot of history to gaming. You know, it's been many decades now of gaming as a form of entertainment, and I think there's a lot of great stories to tell, both in how games are made, the communities they create, and the development of new technologies and how that's integrated in gaming. Gaming is usually at the forefront of a lot of innovation as well. I think there's so many stories to be told from the world of gaming, and it would be really cool to be able to step into a museum and see some of those stories told. That collaboration could start as the game as being actually a source of material for the museum's exhibitions and archives. The gamers, you know, they have a lot of knowledge and actual digital material that would be useful for these exhibitions, but the gamers also have insight into what's important in that huge wealth of material, and what the stories are, and where their points of interest would be, and so having gamers and museums collaborate together would result naturally, I think, in exhibitions that would be more engaging for viewers going to the museum, and be more valuable as a cultural record of this space.
I think museums absolutely must engage with gamers if they're going to look to put gaming on display. I think you need to understand the context, you need to understand how gamers interact with the game, you need to understand all the history of games that have led up to that moment, and you need to understand what's significant about what you're seeing in individual moments that might be displayed.
I came across a website called The Sims Graveyard, and what this is, for all intents and purposes, is an archive of all the custom content that people have created over the years, or what they've been able to recover. And it's a volunteer site ran by donations, and is really wholly a community collaboration effort. I think it definitely is a digital archive repository. You know, it's very kind of organized in the way that they've set it out. So yeah, I definitely agree with that definition. It's very much a snapshot of time, especially in terms of the Sims 2 content, because it's really this little enclave of the culture and the fashion trends and the styles of the time, even in terms of architectural stuff, because you'll have fan content made by people which has like custom hair, custom makeup, clothing, furniture, even houses and stuff people have built, or they've even, you know, recreated celebrities or popular characters in the game as well. I just think it's so important to keep a record of all those efforts and all that time that people have put in, all that work. So, you know, it's a snapshot of time, and it's a record of the passion and the love that people have put into a game. And some people might think, well, it's just a video game, but there's a lot of artistry in there and a lot of skill.
As you can see, the gaming community are more than just players. They're historians, archivists, collectors, and conservators in their own right. Their skills, abilities, and their memories should be utilised by museums to improve our collecting and preserving standards. If you need further inspiration on the profound emotional impact of video games, take a listen to this gameplay story from Alex.
There's one moment in Bioshock Infinite which really stands out to me, where you play as somebody who you eventually learn that you are looking to rescue your daughter from a cloud city of some kind, right? But you only learn that she is your daughter after a period through the game, and you learn it via this scene where a constant mantra throughout the game has been the phrase, "Give us the girl and wipe away the debt." And that line is recontextualized. You think that your job is to retrieve this girl and give it to the people who are employing you, and they will wipe away your debt. But it's also a reference to you giving away your daughter, which set off this whole set of events in motion. And so as you've gone back in time as the protagonist, you are in a small room with a cot where your daughter is lying, and you pick her up, and there is nothing else in the room, and someone standing by the door who says, "Give us your daughter and wipe away the debt." And the only way to progress in the game is to press a button to do exactly that. And it has incredible narrative power at that moment, but it's also a fantastic way of using the limitations of the computer game intertwined with the narrative. Because the computer game has you on rails, you need to get to the next point in the story. But computer games are inherently interactive. So how can we balance the interactive side with that narrative side? What we'll do is we'll take you back to the past and say, this has already happened. You have already given your daughter. That's how the events of the game has happened. So in that moment, you must give away your daughter because that's what you did in the past. But there is still something heart-wrenching about standing in that room with no other options. There are no windows, there is nothing else to interact with, and you must press that button. There's no other way for you to get that emotional response as strongly as you do when you are the player. The interactive element is, when incorporated into the narrative using techniques like that, enhances the emotional experience of the story in a way that you just can't get when you are passively watching something.
As professionals in the museum world, we understand the importance of preserving history and culture. Museums have always been the bridge between the past and the present, but to keep this connection alive and move to the future, we must also evolve with the times. From my own professional experience, it has been a confusing and challenging journey to try to navigate, to preserve, and to catalogue not only the video games, but the complex file structures attached. And don't even get me started on the issue of technological obsolescence when it comes to saving outdated game formats for future use. So for this presentation, I interviewed a range of museum professionals to get their perspective on the difficulties of working with video games in museums.
When it comes to video games, even in the public eye, even though it is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry that surpasses the movie industry, it's still considered toys for kids. So in regards to collecting into a museum, you do get challenges as to, why are we collecting something that is a toy, or why, what's the reason for collecting this thing that, it's not art. However, it's more accepting the new wave of technology that comes through, and, working in the industry, it is refreshing to see those things embraced, particularly, with collecting institutions like Acme and the National Film and Sound Archive and even Powerhouse as well. They're all collecting games, and other collecting institutions worldwide are also doing it because they are a huge cultural phenomenon, and it is exciting to be a part of it, because we know by what happened in the 80s and 90s, a lot of games have disappeared because they weren't preserved, and we don't want that happening to the incredible examples we have here. With gamers comes, again, lack of a better word, nerds. And I'm very much one of them. There comes with the technical knowledge and the expertise of how to emulate games and how to capture the information you need in order to emulate it properly. And then the want to do it too, because the reasons why emulation is a thing is because of nerds who wanted access to things that weren't accessible. The gamers that I've had contact with in my role have all been very, very welcoming and very excited to be sort of involved somewhat in a museum sense. I feel like they would be very on board with that, and like they are very on board with that.
The most detrimental factor of preservation across the board is advocacy. The fact that there is no physical presence of an online game would make it quite difficult for a conservator who specialises in traditional or object conservation to kind of make that physical connection with the object and apply the principles and practices that they know. If they can't connect with it, and if there's no physical object, and if they don't have that background or understanding of it, it's likely that they'll lack a lot of interest in it, and then they don't deem the object worthy enough for preservation. The industry struggles with just having that advocacy, that support, people with the know-how to actually want to support the field, build the field, advocate for it. It's really important to collaborate with the gaming community. It shows a lot of proactivity and initiative for a museum to do that, because the gamers, they have the invaluable knowledge of the context of the games, that experience related to using and playing a game. They have a lot of the technical knowledge as well as the social, historical and cultural context of games. A lot of the technical experience that the museum professional may lack. The museum professional has the broader preservation and archival understanding and skills. Collaborating will help bridge that gap and lead to a more successful preservation effort. The gaming community would make an invaluable contribution in a few different ways. Firstly, they would contribute to the curatorial process by helping to identify the significant games and the aspects of gaming culture that warrant preservation in museums. They know best how the games are played, how they should be experienced and represented. Some of them may even have the technical skills to do the programming and emulating, be able to help develop the preservation tools and strategies within the museum. Could also help by capturing content firsthand. As they're creating it or playing it, they'll be able to capture that content a lot faster than the museum professionals could retrospectively. So if you want to capture legacy content, chances are it's already gone because of how quickly technology changes. So if you're having people that are there, that are the users and creators, collecting it for you, that's just going to be so helpful with your collections future. A lot of these gamers might even have their own personal collections of game-related ephemera, things like gaming magazines, promotional material that would also help supplement those collections.
I think player experiences make what the archive or the object is, and that also includes the developer's experience too in making. So it just adds another layer of storytelling. So a lot of the objects that we have physically, they do have that story behind it, where it's like someone's gone and it's been a family heirloom, or they have a really personal connection to it. So I think also having that associated to game collection, not only just a physical object of like consoles or physical games, but as well as a digital artifact, having that association really does elevate collecting in this area. It does add that human aspect to it, that because it is a digital object in particular, it doesn't seem human, doesn't seem physical, it doesn't seem like you can connect. So having that human experience kind of just personifies that personification. Preconceived notions that people still believe about games are there, but having games in a cultural institution helps to elevate the practice, helps to showcase that games are not only an art form, but they're a very well constructed technological feat of it's just wonderful. So having them in a museum setting just gives them that extra level of validation that often isn't associated in typical conventions like unfortunately like PAX or Comic-Con. It's very much a different crowd.
The importance of involving the gamers themselves in these discussions, because many of these things are artifacts of a culture that only comes alive when people play them. There's many examples. One of the games in our collection is called EVE Online, which is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game that we worked with CCP, the Icelandic developer, to get the full, everything we would possibly need to archive the game. The programming source code, all the kind of version control, all the commented code. We have what we call an EVE in a box, which is a kind of multiple redundant kind of a container, software and hardware container for the game. But the game itself is an empty universe. The game is nothing without its players. So, and this was like a best case scenario where we actually worked with the developers to create a kind of archive of 24 hours of the game. So it's not a living kind of document, but it's just a snapshot of literally every activity that took place within a 24-hour period, and they came up with visualizations to show us how many space battles took place, how much currency was traded, how much mining was done, to kind of give the best kind of impression of what 24 hours of this game in the year, I guess that was 2014 or something like that, looked like, which was really a kind of achievable goal, because when it comes to trying to preserve a game, you're talking about preserving an entire culture. So, in cultural institutions, we're used to people having fairly long tenures. In the tech fields, people churn in and out really quickly. Somebody who's been at a company for 5 years is deemed an old timer. So they're operating on a very different kind of time scale than we are. So all these interesting people I had conversations with 9 years ago, they're all gone and dispersed from that company.
So we can clearly see some of the issues modern day museums are presented with. However, these professionals have not only highlighted their struggles, but also their enthusiasm for video games to be included in museums and for the players to be better represented. I'd like to share with you an example of a museum creating a connection with the gaming community to enhance their museum. I had a wonderful conversation with John O'Shea, the creative director and co-CEO of the National Video Game Museum in Sheffield, who described the incredible efforts this museum has made with the local community to connect the objects with the stories behind them.
What we've been doing is we did a whole phase of community consultation in Sheffield, where we are so we took some pop-up exhibitions basically out into the community, really to ask people in Sheffield what would they expect in a video games museum. Did they know there was a video games museum? Do they play video games? Why do they play them? Why don't they play them? What would make them want to come? So we've gathered a whole first wave of research, and through that process, the logic of that, by the way, is from my perspective and my co-CEO Kat Powell, who we work together on leading the museum. What we want to do, in simple terms, is turn our museum inside out. Always we've been coming back to the question, why do video games matter? Why is this important? Video games right now, and for the last 30 years actually, maybe more, is for me definitely one of the most important media forms of our time, and understanding why that is important and what is happening, what it is doing. That's what museums of this culture should be chasing after. I think getting to why the games matter for the players is a really key piece of the puzzle. So that was a preamble to our next step following the pop-up exhibitions. Through that process, we recruited a whole bunch of people from our locality who we've brought together as our community champions. And this is a rolling program of individuals. They may be games players. They may also be not games players, but enthusiasts, or they may be parents of games players who want to know more. Those individuals are the first individuals who are going to be involved in cataloguing our collection. So it will be those individuals who spend the time with the objects. We'll be training them in object handling and care for collections and things like that. So they'll gain that training, but then through a volunteer program, they'll gain experience working in our museum, and they'll become really the knowledge base. What we need to be able to do is be a nexus within the gaming conservation, care, fandom, ecosystem, and we need to be able to. Our focus is the matter and meaning of video games within culture, and to advocate for that. And that in itself is a type of care. So we want to be in dialogue with everybody who has a stake in video games. And there's no more important stakeholder group than the players.
So now that we've heard from museum professionals and from gamers, what can we take away from their valuable insights? The gaming community offers fresh perspectives, allowing us to reach new audiences and make our collections more relevant. Numerous online communities have been recording and archiving their gameplay for years. This is valuable information in understanding the evolution of the game and the player's involvement. Gamers may hold personal stories and experiences related to specific games, providing contextual information for curators. Their creative contributions, from mods to fan art, enrich the broader cultural context of a game's narrative. Gamers often possess knowledge of emulation tools and techniques crucial for preserving games on older platforms. Gamers can provide detailed metadata such as release dates, developer information, and version histories, aiding in cataloging efforts. Finally, gamers possess an intimate understanding of the gameplay experience, recognizing the nuances that make each title unique. Their contributions extend beyond the digital realm, as they also hold the keys to the rich tapestry of fan communities, forums, and repositories. By collaborating with gamers, museums can gain access to a vast network of passionate individuals who are eager to ensure that the legacy of gaming is safeguarded for future generations. So where can you go from here? Well, I highly recommend joining the conversation. Seek out partnerships and explore ways to integrate gamers' insights into your institutions. Utilize social media. Connect via platforms such as TikTok, Reddit, Facebook, or Twitch to broaden your collaborations. I encourage each of you to initiate conversations, explore ways to include gamers, and maybe even play yourself. I'll leave you with this final thought. A game by itself is an empty object. It's the experience of the player that brings it to life, and it's up to you to make that happen.